Which countries do you think are the most promising to lead the vegan movement?
If you look, for example, the US, I find it a lost cause because it's so polarized that everything.
What do you think is the attitude of the Muslim community?
I had been eating products that come from killed pigs, but I never saw a live pig in front of me. Get one person to go vegan and save a certain amount of animals in 1 year, or you can get an important hotel to make one of their animal-based dishes become plant-based.
Hi everyone, today I am here with none other than Seb Alex. Needs no introduction, but that being said, I messed up with him a couple of days back because he got a haircut. I did not know about it and I asked him, who are you? So I'm sorry for that on camera. And Seb, thank you so much for doing this. Would like to ask you first a very basic question. Why did you go vegan?
Sure.
And how many years back did you go vegan?
Yeah, so I actually went vegan around 11 years ago, and I had been vegetarian for 8 years before that. I had become vegetarian when a friend of mine pointed out my hypocrisy in caring about our cat while eating other animals and even hunting. And my friend was vegetarian, so that's the information I received, and I became vegetarian. And after 8 years, I was wondering why as adult human beings, we are still consuming the breast milk of another animal. Something doesn't make sense there. And I Googled why don't vegans drink milk, because that's one thing I knew about veganism. And I landed on 3 videos. First one, I believe, was 101 Reasons to Go Vegan on YouTube. Second one was Gary Yourofsky's speech. And the third one was Earthlings, the documentary. And when I finished, I thought, okay, well, if I want to be consistent with why I became vegetarian, I now have to become vegan as well. So obviously I didn't like what I learned about, and I didn't want to continue contributing to it in any way. So yeah, that's how I became vegan.
Nice. And you became a vegetarian, so it's fair to say that you became an ethical vegetarian first.
In my understanding, I was an ethical vegetarian.
No, that's an interesting point because I'm from India and I do a lot of activism in India. And in India, we have people who are ethical vegetarians. But just like you, they are not aware of the dairy practices.
Yeah.
So that's that. All right. And can you tell us a bit about the new organization that you have formed? It's not new, it's been 3 years now.
Yeah.
Middle East Vegan Society.
Yeah, Middle East Vegan Society, we started it around 3 years ago. And we have around 14 members now. The idea is that there's no regional organization working in this area. There's amazing grassroots groups, of which I'm part of as well. For example, Lebanese Vegans is one of them. But grassroots groups usually do grassroots actions, and it's more local. And I was thinking, what can we do to have something regional as well that can support the local movements, give a platform to the local groups and activists, as well as do some type of corporate work to bring some change. And that's what we're doing now. So when I say corporate, I mean we work, for example, with hospitals, restaurants, sometimes universities, if you can, to change their menus to make it in a way that consumers are more leaning towards consuming plant-based products or items instead of animal-based ones. And that could be anywhere from adding vegan options to redesigning the menu in a way that consumers end up choosing the vegan options. There's a whole menu study thing that exists in the industry. Another thing that we do is working on the dietary guidelines. At the moment, we're doing that in Saudi Arabia. So we have one member on the team whose background is in public health. So she's working with the Ministry of Health and other organizations to see how they can change the dietary guidelines to add more information about plant-based diets, to ideally make it obvious that you don't need to rely on animal-based diets or reduce the amount that is suggested for people to consume. Of course, we wish we could make the dietary guidelines fully plant-based, but that's not something that you can do overnight. So we're still working to find the best ways that we can impact, because once they are changed, it's applied to all governmental canteens, hospitals, schools, everything that exists. So we also create content or resources for activists to be able to use both in the Middle East and around the world. So that's what we're doing.
Nice. I had a question for later on, but I'll ask now because I have been following your work for quite some time, and I believe that you used to do college lectures and do activism. So that was essentially bottom-up approach. We're talking to individuals and trying to change their mindset. But now with Middle East Vegan Society, what I hear is that you are also now focusing on a top-down approach where you're working with institutions and policies. So in these years of activism, do you think your method towards what's the theory of change has changed? Or would you like to share some thoughts on that?
I wouldn't say fully change. I definitely prioritize my time now in a way that I check what is more impactful. So before I used to do hours of street outreach and maybe get, I don't know, ideally 3 to 4 people really considering to go vegan or go vegan. But then I realized, yeah, but if I spend those 4 hours giving 2 or 3 different lectures in a university where most of the students come with the willingness to listen and learn, then the impact is much bigger. And I always used anonymous feedback forms that the students would fill up. And I saw an amazing impact. And I thought, well, obviously this has a better impact. If we're trying to create impact, we should be data-driven if we can. So that changed one thing. Another thing is understanding how big of an impact corporate work has. Because you can, for example, get one person to go vegan and save a certain amount of animals in 1 year, or you can get an important hotel to make one of their animal-based dishes become plant-based, and then think about the thousands of people that are then not consuming animal-based on that specific dish. And then over the long term, how much more animals that can save, let's say. I still see value in both, which is why Middle East Vegan Society does both consumer work and provider work. So like we are teaching the consumers on how and why to eat plant-based and become vegan. And we're working with the corporate world to make it easier on the consumers to consume plant-based and become vegan.
Yeah. And then is it safe to say, because I've again followed your work, so you are a die-hard abolitionist, right? You would want the world to go vegan right away,
yes.
Right? But unfortunately, that's not the case. And hence, we are taking an alternate route to also explore opportunities where reductionism can help us, or rather help the animals in the number of animals being. Okay. Middle East Vegan Society, so you're operating out of an area where the Muslim community is dominant in terms of the population percentage. What do you think is the attitude of the Muslim community in general, and what are the challenges, and how do you navigate that?
A lot of people think it's more difficult, at least in the Middle East. I can say it's not more difficult. In fact, it has been easier than many, let's say, European countries that I've been in when I have these conversations. Governments as well are usually more open to it, and institutions as well. So we are in touch with an organization based in the US that does corporate work as well, the same way that we do. And we're in touch with them because we wanted to see how they're doing it, and they were guiding us. And they were really surprised at how fast we were getting results. So something that would take us, let's say, 5 to 6 months, they would say, oh, this usually takes 2 years, But because in the Middle East, these entities like businesses or hospitals or hotels, usually it's more difficult for them to change, whereas for us it's been much easier. There's also a study that was done by Euromonitor International, which is a data collecting company, that showed that Middle Eastern and African populations are much more likely to follow plant-based diets, follow vegetarian diets, reduce the consumption of meat, reduce the consumption of dairy products, compared to the rest of the world. So not even like a specific part of the world. Specifically, there was a 14% higher chance for someone from the Middle East or Africa to cut down on meat consumption than the rest of the world. So someone in Europe or the US or Australia, let's say. So that's something we've been seeing in our approach. Of course, we're not going to consumers and talking about reducing consumption of meat or something, or meat-free Mondays or something. That's not what we're doing, but having that data is really important, because then we can see, okay, so they are open, they are more open than the rest of the world. And it's been going well so far. When it comes to specifically the Muslim population, there's a whole religious aspect that you have to think about. And for that reason, we had a group of Muslim vegan activists led by Fawziya Jafan, who is on our team, prepare a breakdown and an initiative and a resource to understand what Islam is, to understand what animal rights is, and see if there's any possibility to believe both in animal rights and be a Muslim as well. It is, of course, a bit more nuanced than just saying yes. For example, in the religion of Islam, it is permitted to kill an animal, but it's not obligatory. So you can't really make the case of if you kill an animal, it's unethical, because then you're going directly against the teachings of the religion. But you can look into what else does the religion say. When it comes to killing, what guidelines does the religion oblige? Like, what does it say? It should be the way of killing an animal. And if you really look into that information, you realize that all factory farms, all big slaughterhouses, none of them can exist in a truly a Muslim way, because there's things like the animal should not see the blood, or see an animal get killed, or the knife, or things like that. And then you walk into a slaughterhouse that has a halal certificate, and all the animals are hung upside down next to each other, getting their throats slit one by one. Well, that's not really halal. That's not what the guidelines obviously say. So you can use those things to talk about it, but you can also use the fact that the Quran itself shows more reward for you
Compassion.
for helping animals, not harming them, helping them. So being an activist is even more rewarded than killing an animal. So based on that, it would become much easier to make the argument like, okay, within the religion it is permitted, but what does God reward more? Killing them or saving them and helping them? And it's very obvious, it's crystal clear. There's more things, of course. You can even get into the health aspect or the environmental aspect. The religion does say, well, in the Quran it says don't overuse water even if you live next to a river with a high flow of water. And then you look at water consumption of the meat industry and the dairy industry. So like there's a lot of environmental arguments, yes, that also support following a plant-based diet. And so we've made this whole guideline and resource, and it's on our website on MiddleEastVeganSociety.org. We also have a very short version of it as a PDF, so activists worldwide can print it with a QR code. As I said, we have just had it translated to Hindi as well. So if there's anyone interested in that, that will be available soon as well.
Nice. We'll definitely look into the Hindi one. Will definitely help in India. And also, like I was discussing with you earlier, that Vegan FTA would like to do a whole collaboration series. Maybe we can plan that throughout the year to make this message more readily available across the globe. You don't go against Islam if you are a vegan, is essentially what we're trying to get at. So you talked about the success stories. Can you quickly give one success case study that Middle East Vegan Society has had recently?
Yeah, we've been working with a few hotels. One of them, Rove Hotel in the UAE. They have several branches. And we've done a few events there. And the events have been very successful, vegan events or vegan markets. But one specific thing is that we now have a certificate that we offer to restaurants or hotels or companies based on the menu that they have. And the certificate will tell you how sustainable they are based on the menu and what changes they can make to the menu to get a higher certificate. So you have bronze, you have gold, silver, platinum, etc. And so far, 2 hotels already changing their menus to level up and get a higher certificate. And that would be, again, as I said, making an option plant-based by default, which is something that has been shown that majority of consumers wouldn't change an option if it's plant-based by default. So if it says you can add egg to it, majority of people don't. But if the item itself had eggs in it, you can just say, hey, can you please make this plant-based by default? And they don't lose anything. The consumer doesn't feel forced, but the consumer most of the time will not add the egg to it. So things like that, or just in general adding the plant-based options, adding plant-based milk, so that would get them a higher certificate when it comes to sustainability. And of course, as we all know, like companies like this, they don't care about a certificate for being ethical. They care about the sustainability part, sometimes for their image.
That too for the branding, that they're sustainable because it makes them look more appealing to their audience.
And this specific hotel, Rove Hotel, is actually working a lot on sustainability, and they've been very open to it to the point that they even offered us a space to hold an event there, which was really great. So they've been very supportive of us as well at the same time. And that's one story. We are now working with a hospital as well in Dubai, which is interested in changing their menus as well to get more plant-based options, and we'll see how that goes.
Nice. Good luck with that. And I'll talk about your content, one of content pieces, and then I'll ask you a ethical, philosophical question on that. So you made a video where you were talking in a classroom where you were saying that the animal use is what is animal abuse, which is essentially the commodity status of animals, which use leads to abuse. But you mentioned one very interesting thing, that it's hidden by the industry, that people are not aware of it. So I would like to ask you that, do you think it's only the industry responsible, or how much do you think there's personal accountability as well? And then I have a follow-up question on that.
Sure. I would say the industry is mostly responsible because they're involved in lobbying to pass specific laws that protects them. They're involved in harming or legally going after activists that are trying to expose them. We know that the industry has killed hundreds of activists around the world, mostly the ones exposing their environmental impact in South America. The industry is responsible of having an influence in what's being distributed in school canteens, how they pay actors and influential people to show the importance of consumption of animal-based foods, and also kind of support financially medical centers or schools to teach the students about dairy consumption, for example. So I would hold them much more responsible of what they're doing than the consumer who has been victim of manipulation by all these different factors that the industry is playing a part in. Now, once the consumer has been given the information, how they act on it from then, that would also possibly make them responsible if they change or don't change. But I do think the bigger responsibility lies with the industry who's willingly acting in this manner.
Interesting. So essentially, I think the keyword that you used is that individuals are manipulated by the company doings.
Yeah.
Okay. But then also, like, I generally feel that individuals should enhance their critical thinking and not be manipulated by people in general, and of course the industry as well. There's a popular quote, I can't recall who said it, maybe you know, that if slaughterhouses had a glass wall, everyone would be a vegetarian. I think that was the
Paul
quote.
McCartney.
Yeah. And the essence of that quote is that since everything is happening behind doors and people are unaware, that's why all of this is happening. Now, I have a counterintuitive theory to that, and it's basically coming because I'm an activist based out of India. In India, we have open slaughterhouses. Like if you walk, you'll find slaughterhouses. So it's not something which is hidden. It's happening right in front of people. Not sure if we say that people are manipulated, but I think the more apt term here would be that they are psychologically numbed, desensitized to the whole thing. So in India, only the dairy industry, the cruelty of dairy industry is unknown, but everything else is
out in the open.
So this psychic numbing, how do you tackle that? Because I think that is also a huge issue.
I think usually when someone is going to be affected by something like this, there is a certain amount of like emotional factor that plays a part. But if they are desensitized, the emotional factor is completely out of the question. And I think that's when we can use simple logic to have these conversations. I personally love the, not the tactic, but the conversation that starts from if they believe in human rights, and then draw a logical conclusion from there. So I would ask them like, okay, you believe in human rights, yes or no? Yes. Why do you believe in human rights? Well, because we are the same, and the differences that we have are morally relevant differences. Okay, perfect. We all agree with that. What is the morally relevant difference?
A typical name the trait.
Exactly, name the trait with the animals that they're missing. They can't answer that part. So if the emotional factor is something that's not going to play any role, then you can always talk about the logic. I personally always prefer using the logical part. I still like for people to see how bad it is for these animals, but I want people to agree on animal rights based on logic more than emotion, because emotions can change. Whereas logic, if once you have the logic, going back on it is kind of weird.
Interesting. But now that as an activist, now it's a very interesting thought, but as an activist now, I feel more, I don't know about you, I'll ask you this, but I personally feel more emotionally connected to animals than ever before. And every city, every town we go to, even here we went to the wet market, documented, and then we were like, for some time we were very emotional. Now I feel more connected. Do you think that's the case with you as well?
I mean, I remember the first time I went to a vigil and I saw a pig, and I looked in the eyes of a pig. I had never seen a pig before, you know. I had been eating products that come from killed pigs, but I never saw a live pig in front of me. And then, of course, with time, I started going to sanctuaries and actually spending time with these animals, whether it's a sheep or a goat. I love goats, or a cow, or a pig, as I said, you know. And you see how they are like all different from each other. They have different personalities. Or chickens, for example, they're very, very different from each other. So I definitely feel that, and I think that's because once you stop seeing them as a commodity, you acknowledge their personality as well. So I think that plays a part in it.
Yeah, essentially with logic, you align your thoughts, okay, animals are here. And then once you made that connection, and then I think emotion plays a huge role. Right? That emotion is one of the reasons that keeps us motivated to go like beyond our means to stretch and fight for the animals. So you have been doing activism for a long time. I'll ask you this as objectively as possible. What are the 3 things you feel that has to change for the world to go vegan, or mostly vegan?
3 things. Well, I would say first and foremost, people should stop seeing other animals as commodities. I think if that doesn't change, we'll never have a vegan world. Second is animal agriculture should somehow become less financially appealing, which is something that is happening in some areas of the world. Farmers are like, well, we're not making enough money from this, we're just going to transform to something else. The third one is ideally people in power having more conscience than they do now, which is close to zero, but have some type of ethical consideration towards the living beings we share this world with. I would say, just at the top of my head, those are the three things.
Interesting. Yeah, I think the first one is the most important, and from practical purposes, the second one seems more approachable, or where we are trying to weaken the industry in one way or the other. Which countries do you think are the most promising to lead the vegan movement?
I've had like different, not approaches, but different opinions about this. I used to think it would be some country in Europe or even the US, let's say. But if you look, for example, the US, I find it a lost cause because it's so polarized that everything is this versus that. And if you're part of this political party, you can't be this and you have to be that. And it's like a set of beliefs that are handed to you. You know, if you are from this party, this is how you should be with all your other views. And the second you do that, you are confirming that half of the country cannot go vegan, you know, or a bit more or less than half. So I don't really have hope at all that this would happen in the US. And I think Canada is kind of similar, but not as bad. I am just wondering, what do we have now and what are possible factors that a country could go plant-based or vegan, let's say. Let's say plant-based for the sake of not wondering whether the ethical aspect would change. So a few things that we have to look at is, how do they currently look at plant-based diets? How much is the animal agriculture industry present? And whether or not they are able to create food locally, or do they rely on external factors? So one country I can think about, Qatar, has the world's, I believe, fourth, if I'm not mistaken, fourth best dietary guidelines because of how positive they are about plant-based options and plant-based diets and eating plant-based in general and not relying on animal-based food. So the fourth best in the world. That's really good. Netherlands is, I believe, the first, if I'm not mistaken. And we'll talk about that as well. Another thing is that Qatar does rely on importing animal-based products. A lot of Middle Eastern countries rely on importing for meat, for example, because like I come from Lebanon, we don't have a meat industry. There's very small farms where cows or other animals are killed for their flesh, but usually it's imported. And so when there's the idea of importing, you're talking about food security. What if there are sanctions? What if the prices went up? What if you're not able to import? Then you're going to have to rely locally. Unfortunately, if other than the chicken industry, the other industries are non-existent. So ideally, it has to be a country that's open to plant-based diet, that has a food insecurity problem. And when it comes to the Netherlands, although they have the best, if I'm not mistaken, dietary guidelines, they do have a massive farming industry. So they're not relying on
other countries
importing. Now, recently, there have been some changes. A lot of farmers are incentivized to quit animal farming and switch to something else. So that may be still a positive thing. Netherlands might be the one based on that. But again, if I think about Qatar, the Qatari government itself has been investing in cell-based agriculture. They've been investing in products like Just Egg. I don't know if you know about it. And I'm not talking about individuals. I'm talking about the government has invested in that. So for me, that's a big sign that, well,
there's hope that
exactly
plant forward,
exactly
are plant forward, like maybe ethical veganism, they are mostly plant forward.
Yes, yeah, it seems like it. I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but it seems like it's a big possibility. I hope. I don't know. I mean, I hope for any country to do that. Another country that I can think about is Saudi Arabia, because they also rely on importing and they have a food security aspect as well, as we talked about. Now, one thing that we know is that around 2 or 3 years ago, the Saudi government signed an agreement on two things. One was promoting consuming more plant-based because their population was not consuming enough fiber. And second was trying to invest more in plant-based alternatives so that they don't have to rely on importing. Again,
that's a good sign.
Let's see what happens. I don't know. But I really think these factors of food security, dietary guidelines at the moment, and the existence or non-existence of animal agriculture industry, those factors can kind of give us an idea of which country could be the first.
Okay, interesting. An important variable is also the population of a country, because then that means that many number of people are becoming vegan or plant-based or plant-forward. So have you given any thought about China and India?
I actually was going to say earlier, but that because of our work, I am more like I have more information on Middle Eastern countries. So there might be a case that there is another country out there that's doing much better on all these factors. I just don't know which one it would be. I have heard recently that apparently China has one of the fastest growing vegan business. Like when it comes to stats, the vegan businesses.
In fact, I was talking to someone from China recently, and I was surprised to know that there are provinces within distance of 4 or 5 kilometers. There are like so many vegan businesses and restaurants.
Yeah.
And I was completely shocked.
I've heard of that as well. Now the downside is that I'm also aware that there's a massive animal agriculture industry, and they are building skyscrapers skyscrapers, massive buildings, like I don't know, 25, 30 floors high for pig farming. So that's obviously not a good sign that they are building that now. It obviously means that it's not going to end anytime soon. But the fact that they have seen a massive rise in vegan food consumption and vegan businesses popping up, that's promising as well. For India, I don't really have that much information or knowledge.
You should visit India.
Yeah.
Make a commitment on camera that yes, I'll visit
Well,
India.
I heard that next year's conference might be in India, if I'm not mistaken.
Even I heard the same,
Okay, so yeah, hopefully next year.
Do you know any activists from India?
I know, not personally, I would say, other than you now. I know of Arvind.
Yeah.
I actually really, really like his work.
Cool. Just one last question. What do you think the animal rights movement is missing right now?
More funds and resources and people concentrating on abolitionist approach rather than welfare approach, I would say. Yeah. I mean, they say that the definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And I think we've been trying the welfare approach long enough to see that it's not
more
really
than
working.
3 decades.
Yes, at least.
At least.
Yes.
And it's not working.
It's not. I mean, I've only seen one situation so far, where I believe it was in Germany, that showed that the welfare work was causing an indirect financial damage to the industry. But that was one case from one study. If this was the case all the time, everywhere, we would have seen much more impact or difference. My fear with welfare is that it does not tackle the idea that animals should not be commodities. It does not tackle the idea that they should have basic moral rights. And a lot of times when welfare work is done and some kind of change is implemented on how animals are exploited, that causes a rise in the cost of farming them, but therefore a rise in the cost of the product, the final product. You pay more, for example, for cage-free eggs than cage eggs. And that can result in higher profits if the company wants to sell it for more expensive because they have a nice label on it that says cage-free, you know. So if you pass a law that is creating more income possibly for a company, if you're passing a law that's, if anything, confirming that they are commodities, and you're passing a law that's making the company pride themselves in the new change, it's probably not going to be something that's going to end the industry. And that's my fear. I used to buy cage-free eggs when I was vegetarian because I felt better, and I paid more for it.
But the theory is that not everyone will be able to buy, and hence overall demand will fall down. I mean, that's...
But those who are not buying are still going to buy caged. So there's going to be a high demand for cage.
Exactly. So, I mean, in that scenario, even though I'm an abolitionist, but if I have to speak for the welfareist movement, I think it can give us benefit or give animals the benefit if there's some sort of dichotomy that, okay, cage-free is acceptable, but then caged are completely banned. Completely done away with. Otherwise, you are just expanding the product
market.
That's
I think like when you work on banning something, I personally don't think that's welfareism. Like
that's pressure campaign targeting.
Exactly.
The abolitionist approach. It's just a strategy thing.
Yeah, exactly. Then I'm for it. So if you can ban different practices, if you can ban, let's say, zoos to operate in a city, I don't think that's welfareist. But if you say the zoos should be nicer for the animals, obviously that would be welfareist. And just to be clear, like I don't have obviously enough information or proof that it should never be done. I personally just think it's being done way too much, and the amount of money that is spent on it is ridiculous. People don't know how much money is spent on welfare campaigns, and a lot of the times they end up in nothing but commitments. So a supermarket signs a paper that in 10 years they commit to no longer sell caged eggs. But in 10 years, they can take that back. They can not do anything about it, but they can't go to jail just because they didn't commit to it. There's no accountability process, you know?
Nothing legally binding.
Yeah, exactly. So I had a friend who was preparing like a very long Excel sheet of all the campaigns that had been done, that had passed commitment, let's say agreements, and then just clicking next to it, yes or no. Like, did they actually commit to the commitment or not? Because it's a really sad result if you look at the overall impact. So yeah, that's one thing I would hope one day would change in the movement. If people want to do welfare work, I think, okay, I mean, obviously I can control what people do, but I do wish that the allocation of the funding and resources was not as extreme as it is right now.
Yeah. The saddest part in this whole thing is that there are people who are abolitionist at heart, who want animal slavery to end, but there is no scope of work for them within the movement, because like you said, the funds are going into all these welfarist organizations, and that is where the jobs are as well.
Well, I know organizations that do welfare work just because if they don't, they won't get funding. So they try to do a little bit of welfare work so that they can get enough funding to also cover the cost of doing other type of work, which is really sad. So yeah, hopefully that will change one day.
Yes, hopefully. And one last message for the viewers.
I would say, if you can, ideally, like what helped me a lot in my work is educating yourself on what animal rights is about. For way too long, I just thought about veganism and what veganism is and how to go vegan and everything. But reading a bit on the philosophy of animal rights is extremely useful. You cannot imagine how much more it will like impact your work. If I could recommend one book, it would be by Tom Regan.
The Case for Animal Rights.
No, that one is too difficult for...
Exactly,
it's heavy.
I keep telling people...
The Case for Animal Rights is heavy.
It's the best book, but
yes,
it is such
it's very heavy. You get a headache.
Yeah, you get a headache, especially if someone who's not from a philosophy background.
Yes.
And because I think the first few chapters are just talking about different philosophies of different... But anyway...
And for that reason, he wrote Animal Rights and Human Wrongs, which is much lighter and still has the overall the same message. So, I mean, that's an amazing book. You can also read from Gary Francione, who has amazing books as well. So, yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much, Seth, for doing this.
Thank you.
And love your work, and wish you all the best with whatever you are doing with Middle East Vegan Society.
Thank you.
And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.